because I guess they see me as the younger generation, although I'm really not that young as long as you think I might be, but I do see and recognize just how important it is to understand the history of the organization, where we've been and where we're going. And to really celebrate this 35-year anniversary, I'm very excited to hear more from them on their experience as really pivotal leaders in this organization. So thank you so much for joining us. Do we actually have an extra mic that might be able to provide to David and Ed? Wilson, where are you?
Took the mic. You don't get to eat. You gotta work.
Wilson's also one of my favorite awesome team members. Okay, so I really wanted to kick us off by having Ed here, who had the pleasure of speaking a little bit before this event, to really give us some context on the history of Monterey, because I think that really helps provide us that historical information on how the organization started to let us better understand where we will be going here. So, Ed, would you mind sharing a little bit of the history since we've been part
That's
of the
okay.
organization?
Mission.
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. How many people were born after 1989 here? And many of you were babies at that time. So what I like to do is to sort of create a virtual reality about the landscape of that year. I did a little bit of research. So first of all, that was the year the Berlin Wall came down. So East Germany and West Germany got united, which was followed by many revolutions of the European Eastern Bloc. And in China, Tiananmen Square. It was kind of like a defining event. Many of you may have seen the picture of a man standing in front of a military tank to protest. A little bit closer to home, there was a year a major earthquake hit Loma Prieta. It happened right in the middle of the baseball World Cup of the two Bay Area teams. And part of the Bay Bridge was actually collapsed. And lastly, for you guys who are Taylor Swift fans, Taylor was born that year. Okay, come back to Mount Jade. Mount Jade was established in 1989. And later on, it changed its name to Mount Jade West because Mount Jade becomes a global organization. Initially, it was formed by many of the leaders who were kind of executives of the Taiwanese companies. And rumor has it they want to form a group where they can talk in Chinese. I'm not sure it's true or not. But very quickly after that, they think it's important to draft some executives from the major US-based companies. So Dr. David Wayne was here from Applied Material, and myself and Hewlett Packard were the first two got drafted to the organization, and we both became chairman. Very quickly, we also found out, and we also found out that we now have some people joining in who doesn't speak fluent Chinese. So we formulated what's now known as MJAA, so that the language there would be more English-based. And at that time, I have to tell you that the notion of venture capital and startup, even though it was history in the Bay Area, but was not very understood in the Chinese American community. So Mount Jade sponsored several venture capital forums to discuss what this means and what this could mean. And in fact, many of the participants at that time became very successful venture capitalists. And in the Bay Area, investing not only in the US, but also in Taiwan and China. I think the later on, there was a major event that was introduced by Dr. Sing Kong, who's also sitting here. And he was the chairman then. He came and talked to me he said he wants to form a speaker series to not talk about business, not to talk about technology, to talk about life experience. We didn't know what we were doing, so he asked me to be the first speaker. And I remember it was held at the E3 office. And we didn't know what, I was trying to figure out what the audience wanted to hear. Turns out that I think we have 120 people participating, and they have now become what's known as the Ken Chang Speaker Series. And some of you know Ken Chang was the chancellor of UC Berkeley in the past. The mentorship program was also established to really let senior people really have an opportunity to share experience and ideas with the younger generation, as you hear from the Nana and also from Julie, that they have become a very sustainable program, and I think it's doing a lot of good for people to share. So I think that you can see, even though looking back, it always looks as a regular invention, but all these programs, in my mind, were very, very, very successful innovation. It continues. And Julie and I were talking during lunch, as it's not only looking back at the history, many of these programs and the organizations sustained after 35 years. So kind of like a recap of what I can remember in the early years of Mount J. And I think that it's probably a good idea to give a round of applause to all the past chairmen here and not here for their dedication, for their innovation, and that's my summary.
Yes, thank you so much, Ed. I mean, when you spoke on that, I just, the phrase that comes to mind is standing on the shoulder of giants. Everyone that has paved the way for us to be able to have this organization to not only support, but really uplift and move forward. That's what I see in this legacy of 35 years. David, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you through the mentorship program, but I know you've had a really interesting experience with Monty J, and would love for you to share a little bit of that story, how you got connected to the organization.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of giants, I had no idea I was hanging out with giants when I first started. So I had a funny story. I grew up volunteering. So every weekend, my mom and dad would ask me to go to temple, so we would go mow the yard, tar the roofs, sweep the floors. So volunteering for me came second nature. It just was normal. But I lost that when I had gone to college. A little bit too much drinking, too much partying. Schooling, education. So when I came back, I was actually approached by a person named Alan Wu. I don't see him here, but he asked me, "Do you want to volunteer?" And I said, "Sure, of course. I love volunteering." I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I remember I had a lunch with Sean Wang from E-Tree and Alan, and they were interviewing me over this lunch, just double checking who this guy was. They said, "Okay, this guy looks okay." So they brought me and invited me to help run this thing called an annual conference. I had no idea what number one, what these trade organizations were doing. I had no idea what Monty J was. I had no idea that Monty J was a mountain in Taiwan. And I had no idea what an annual conference was. But I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll volunteer." And so that year I ran the annual conference for Peter Chu. And he was my primary window to Monty J. When I realized how big the organization was, I decided to learn a little bit more about it. And so what did I do? I started poking around. What else is here? The mentorship program. And I said, you know what? I need a little bit of mentoring. So I became a mentee, sorry. And my mentor was Larry. Small world. I had not met my wife at that time, but Larry, both my mother-in-law and father-in-law, at some point worked for Larry. That's how small the world is.
Destiny.
So I started off volunteering, and through this program, what I realized, what I found out was there were so many amazing people in the organization. My mom has always told me, the world lanes into two groups of people. People that are 大方 and people that are 小气. And she told me something really simple, and I thought that was a great idea. Just hang out with people that are more taaham, and you will have a good life. And I found it at Hong Jing. So that was my start of my journey. And through that, I've continued to volunteer, I've continued to give back. And today, the organization continues to grow and persist without me. I'm out. I'm not doing anything these days. It's great. But thank you very much for all the support of all the prior chairs, the current chair, and all the chairs that follow me as well. Thank you for everything you do to make this work.
Thank you, David. And actually, it's not true. He's still very much involved, teaching as well as providing mentorship for the chair, like myself, along with Peter, and we have Larry, who is also on the advisory, and Denise Peck, who's over there. So this has really been a fantastic community for me to continue to grow, and thank you, Dave, for providing your further guidance and mentorship. So.
Development. One was I took a delegation to Southeast Asia. That was actually the first time I met Si Yao and David. David actually I know for a long time, but she was very, very powerful. I remember she got us connected and met with Prime Minister Mahathir in that meeting. And later on, with the help of the Science Division, we established Mount J Taiwan. And I negotiated to have the Premier Liu Zhaoshun, who became the first chairman of Mount J Taiwan. As some of you know now, Mount J Taiwan has become a very, very powerful organization. So I think that it has now global impact.